Butch, how's your county roads hanging up on that good other side?
So we got a few problems with some freezing and thawing, but not bad.
We got a
Rolling
bunch.
out.
We got a bunch on our side that's really bad. The weather was hard on them.
All right, I see 6 o'clock. The County Services Committee meeting will be called to order. I have asked J.P. Simons to do the prayer and pledge for us. Will you stand and join us in the prayer?
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to come to you and conduct the county's business. We pray that you'll be with us and impart your wisdom and guidance as we do the business of the county. Thank you for the beautiful weather today and the beautiful county that we live in. Thank you for your provision and protection upon it. I pray that you'll bless this community. And thank you for your leadership and guidance. Pray that you'll watch over us, lead us, guide us, and protect us in all we do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag
of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, J.P. Simons. Miss Patty, will you please do the roll call?
Robert Dennis.
Here.
Ricky Hires.
Here.
Please.
Butch Pond.
Here,
Sean Simons.
Here.
Evelyn Rio Stafford.
Here.
Jim Wilson.
here.
And Sam Duncan.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thanks, Patty. So prior to jumping into adoption of the agenda, I just wanted to make 2 quick comments. The first of which is about the food drive that J.P. Simons has put together. So thank you for putting that together. I have just a short bit of information I'll read around that. So Washington County is participating in a county-wide food drive. All food collected will be donated to the NWA Food Bank. The Northwest Arkansas Food Bank serves 4 Northwest Arkansas counties by providing an affordable and credible food source to partnering agencies serving the hungry. When J.P. Sean Simons reached out to offer help, the food bank replied with a resounding thank you and stated, as the amount of hungry people in our area continues to grow, food drives are becoming an increasingly important way for the Northwest Arkansas Food Bank to provide food to those who are struggling to find their next meal. So please check the county Facebook page often to see more and evolving details. Many have come forward to help, and the county will be posting updates to our county page. So again, thank you for that. Really excited to participate in that. I know many of the JPs are seeking out locations within their district to be drop-off locations. So separate from that, I know the last county services meeting, there was some information spread following that meeting that was more misinformation. So I just wanted to reference, make a comment around public comment. So the court allows for up to 12 minutes of public comment, 3 minutes per person. And that was established in Ordinance 2016-66. The 12 minutes of public comment time is allotted at both quorum court meetings and at committee meetings. Whereas the time that public comment is given is different. Public comment time at quorum court meetings is held at the beginning, and public comment time and committee meetings is held at the end, traditionally. In section 2-32, part C, additional public comment time may be added to any of the public comment periods by a majority vote of the quorum court or the committee holding the meeting. So said another way, if we've reached our allotted 12 minutes of time and additional individuals would like to speak, that will be taken to a vote as written in the county ordinance. So again, thank you for those who have spoken up in committee meetings, at quorum court meetings from the public, and then also who've reached out via Facebook. We appreciate your engagement with government. So with that, I will open up for adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Dennis?
I'd like to add a discussion time about the planning department, specifically about fees that they're charged for builders. Just some discussion about it. And I know a good politician never brings anything up he doesn't already answer to, but I would just like to hear a little bit more about the fees that are charged. I'd like to see that department more self-reliant on its fees.
Do I hear a second to JP Dennis's addition to the agenda?
Second.
So we have a motion by JP Dennis and a second by JP Simons. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, I will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as edited.
So moved.
All those in favor? Any opposed? So we'll add the discussion time as item number 5 to the agenda, and moving public comment to item number 6. With that, item number 4, J.C. Wilson.
Okay, this is a proposed ordinance to try to establish the procedures for how we attack these things. There are two main things that I am trying to achieve in here. One is to require that ordinances go through the appropriate committee before proceeding to the full quorum court. The second item is to limit the introduction of an ordinance to once per year or more often than 12 months once it fails. There is a minor adjustment that I think that we probably need to make to Article 1, and I'd ask that County Attorney Lester offer that change.
So JP Wilson, yeah, can you hear me?
Barely.
JP Wilson inquired, and there's an ordinance 2019-23 that exempts ordinances to ratify conditional use permits granted or denied by the Planning and Zoning Board from going to committee. The purpose of that that was passed was, given the way that the planning board meetings work, sometimes the planning board meeting is the Thursday before the quorum court meeting. And if there are projects that are non-controversial, that all the neighbors agree with, no one has any issues, by requiring those to go to a committee meeting, the applicant would thereafter have to wait over a month before they could continue on their project. And so at the time, the quorum court felt the need to have a process and to allow conditional use permit ratifications to bypass committees. And so my suggestion would be that in Article 1 state, we insert after ordinances. So basically it would state all general ordinances, and then you'd insert, except for an ordinance to ratify a conditional use permit granted or denied by the Planning and Zoning Board, shall be presented to the county attorney, and keep going from there. Or you could simply add a second article and state it just as it is stated in Ordinance 2019-23. And that ordinance states that an ordinance to ratify a conditional use permit granted or denied by the Planning and Zoning Board shall not be referred to a committee, but shall be referred directly to the quorum court for consideration.
Those things that go through planning, and so I think that either of those modifications.
Point of privilege, please. I'm sorry, I have a point of privilege. JP Wilson, you were from my end. You were muted during the first part of what you were saying.
Okay. I don't appear to be muted now, so did you hear any of what I said?
Only just the first few words before I called a point of privilege. So if you could
Okay.
sorry to ask you to repeat yourself, but if you
Sorry,
could.
I guess I'll go back and just make the main points again then, because I don't want y'all to, I don't think that's, I think it's there, so, yeah. So the 2 points that I'm trying to achieve are to require ordinances to go through the appropriate committee before proceeding to the full court. The second item is to limit the introduction of an ordinance to once per year, once it fails. That's assuming one fails. And then, did you hear the modification offered by Attorney Lester? Okay, so I've said that I was fine with either of those modifications that he offered to this. So if nobody has any particular preference on those, we'll just go ahead and use the exception that he read first and go with that. Does anybody have any particular preference on which of those modifications would be included in this? Yes, Butch?
J.P. Pond. Whoops.
I would think that whichever one of those the county attorney thinks would work more smoothly for the court and the planning board and developers would be my preference. I rely on his judgment as the county attorney to make that decision.
Thank you, J.P. Pond. County Attorney Brian Lester. Weigh in.
I think after looking at it, my suggestion would be that at the end of Article 1, we add a language that says except that, and then we add the entire language from the 2019-23 ordinance. And it would then state after ordinance, except that an ordinance to ratify a conditional use permit granted or denied by the Planning and Zoning Board shall not be referred to a committee, but shall be referred directly to the full court for consideration. I think that would be my suggestion to make it as clear and concise as possible.
And that's fine with me, Chairman.
So I'm hearing a motion.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance as modified by Attorney Lester.
And to be sent to the full quorum court.
Yes, thank you.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion around this ordinance?
Chairman, so what and who determines what constitutes the same ordinance? So within a year's time frame, if an issue comes up that an ordinance originally addressed, times have changed, circumstances are different, and there's a need for a similar ordinance, how is that determined? Or is it simply the exact same ordinance brought forward? Yeah.
Attorney Lester, I'm going to defer that question to you.
Well, I think that as it's written, it would be the exact same ordinance because it doesn't say an ordinance that is the same or similar. It just says an ordinance itself shall not be brought within less than a year. The way I read it, it says basically the exact same ordinance.
Okay. And I apologize, I'm just seeing the hands raised on Zoom. I'm not sure who was first, so I'll go in the order that's shown on my screen. JP Rita Stafford.
I was actually going to say JP Hires had her hand up first. If you're okay with me going first,
Yes.
that's okay.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. I actually had a question about Article 7 in this, which repeals resolution 1979. But if I go into our municipal codes, it looks like resolution 1979 was superseded a bunch of different times in 2001, in 2002, in 2016, and then it looks like the most recent one actually was one that the court passed 2 years ago, Ordinance 2019-04. So the provisions of this ordinance, if 2019-04 isn't being repealed, it would look like this is in conflict with 2019-04 because they both talk about similar things, but in different ways. So my question is this going to cause, are we going to have two sets of rules here that are both in effect?
Question for the
Again, Attorney Lester.
So I understand and understand the point. The 1979-01 resolution has basically been amended out of existence. So this would just repeal that ordinance to get it off the books. But you are correct. There could be that issue. And so my suggestion would be that you add an article that states that, any portion of any ordinance in conflict hereto is hereby repealed. And that would basically make this ordinance supersede anything else that's going on. Would be one way to take care of it.
JP Hires.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions, and then I also have a comment. I'll just start off with my questions. I'd like to know why this is needed. Why is this change needed? I'm having trouble understanding why we need to have this, why we had an entire meeting about this one ordinance. I'd also like to ask the county attorney if is the prohibition on bringing back an ordinance within a year, is this constitutional? I'm not really sure on that point. Those are my questions. I'd like to also just say, I'm really opposed to this. I do not understand why we as a legislative body would strip ourselves of our constitutional duty to legislate. I have some thoughts as to why this has come up now, but I don't understand why we would legislate ourselves out of power at the same time that we're pushing a resolution in the regular quorum court to give the legislative branch of Arkansas more power and take power away from the executive. I just find this to be a conflict. But the big question that I would like to be answered is that prohibition on bringing back an ordinance constitutional?
I think that, the Constitution of Arkansas and the state laws that follow have given broad discretion to the local legislative bodies to self-regulate. It gives you the ability to set your own procedural rules that thereby govern all of your meetings. There are certain state laws that will supersede any of those, and one of which is the number of members it takes to pass an appropriation ordinance or an emergency ordinance on one reading, the number it takes to, well, I guess those are the main ones that come to mind. So, that is not something that you would find in any procedural rule, like such as Roberts. They're basically talks about a 2/3 majority or just a majority vote, and the state statutes have set something different, so that supersedes. Other than that, the state legislature has given the local legislative branches, pretty good discretion to kind of self-govern. One example that comes to mind is the law requires or allows that JPs be paid for every meeting that they attend. Well, in Washington County, we have an ordinance that allows you to miss one meeting and still get paid. I don't think that's unconstitutional because I don't think it's limiting that which the Constitution, which state law has provided to allow. And so honestly, I don't know that I would say this is unconstitutional. Then again, I've not found anything on point from a quick glance that would suggest that this has been an issue before, but I will certainly be happy to look into that.
Any other discussion? Yes. JP Ecke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see the merits to this ordinance as follows. When you are able to bring a proposed ordinance before a committee, you allow the committee to have a discussion and to engage in fine-tuning that ordinance, adding different ideas, perhaps, as we say, looking at both sides of the coin or all facets of the diamond, and really bringing forth a well laid out ordinance, well thought out, and it's something that the committee participated in. There's also time for public discussion during that time to take under consideration. When it eclipses the committee, it doesn't give any of the JPs time to really discuss and understand what the thought processes are of the JP bringing the ordinance to the full quorum court, because we are regulated by FOIA, and we're not allowed to discuss how we're going to vote or the ordinance at hand. So based on those reasons, Mr. Chairman, number one, it's fully vetted. Number two, engagement really drives brilliant ideas, better ideas, and it gives the public time to think about it, discuss it also, and to participate not only at committee meetings, but also then at quorum court meetings. And that's why I feel that this is a great idea. If we need to work on it a little bit more, I'm glad it's going through committee and not just to the straight to full quorum court. So that way we're all on the same page and we're able to research and be prepared, better prepared. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, JP Ecke. I see JP Washington's hand raised at the floor.
Thank you. I would just like to ask a question for clarification. Is the ordinance that was presented from 1979 the actual procedural rule? Because if memory serves me correct, in early 2019, we did pass an ordinance that JP Rio Stafford mentioned. And behind that ordinance was that things would go through a committee before they went to the full quorum court, but we did amend it to offer a provision so that ordinance could also be presented to the quorum court without going through a committee. So I guess I'm just a little confused because this one is presented from 1979, but that's not the current rule. So I don't understand the need to repeal a rule that we don't use. And I just would like to know what is wrong with the procedure that we already have in place.
Thank you, JP Washington. I don't know, County Attorney Lester, if you want to address that, or JP Wilson.
The resolution from 1979 is outdated. It was passed way back when before a lot of laws have changed, a lot of things have changed. It set up just a procedure to introduce ordinances. It has been legislated out of existence, basically. And so we still have a resolution that is still quoted. Under Arkansas law, you can only amend an ordinance or a resolution by an ordinance or resolution, and not through, and in the past, the county's gotten into this idea, and it was actually procedural, and it was adopted to amend based on the codified code. The county doesn't have any say over the codification of our code. That's done by a separate group. And so it's codified. The ordinances that it includes in that codification that shows up online is what that group, that organization feels is how it should be codified. So there are some ordinances that you may not get everything in the ordinance listed. So it's kind of in my opinion, a misnomer when you look at it that way. But needless to say, this ordinance from 1979 talks about the prosecuting attorney submitting ordinances to the prosecuting attorney. Since that time, there was a law change that allowed for the counties to have a civil attorney, which took all the duties civil duties of the prosecuting attorney and placed it with that of the county attorney. The other things in here are have all been amended by the quorum court over the years, the other ones. So there's no reason other than to take this out so that it's not being cited when people are looking to see what all ordinances need to be, or back in the 79, they, everything was done by resolution, not ordinances. That's another law that changed that's come about. And so by taking this out of circulation, when you get ready to modify something again, or future quorum courts do, you don't have to go back and modify this particular piece of legislation, if that makes sense.
So, Mr. Chairman, it does sound like that Attorney Lester's trying to cure the one problem for 1979. It does sound like we need an additional article in here that would repeal any other ordinances that are in conflict with this ordinance, as I understand what has been stated. Is that your understanding?
It is.
So it sounds like we need an amendment to this, if someone would want to make that motion to amend this to have a general repealer of other ordinances in conflict with this ordinance. Your understanding, sir?
Yes. Open the floor.
I would make that motion.
Your motion is to repeal any ordinances that are in conflict with this ordinance. Is that correct? Okay.
I'll second.
A motion, and I hear a second by JP Pond. Any other discussion, members of the committee? JP Hires.
JP Hires has her hand raised.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the other question that I had that kind of got glossed over. I don't understand why we need this change. I really don't understand the problem that we're trying to fix. I feel like we're trying to fix a problem that does not exist. And so I really need to be convinced that this is worthwhile and that there's a problem that really needs to be fixed, that we're repealing the ordinance that we already put into play. I'm sorry, otherwise I can't support this.
Thank you, JP Hires. JP Rio Stafford.
I'd like to make an additional motion to strike Article 6.
Second.
Parliamentarian, help me understand what the proper procedure is. If we have a motion on the floor to revise the ordinance and then a new motion, what's procedurally the next move?
I believe you have a motion to amend, and then a motion to amend the amendment, and then a motion to strike. Is that correct?
Correct.
Which would be another motion basically to amend what's been amended. Under Roberts, you can go into amendment up to 2, so because it gets too confusing based on what Robert says. So when you have a motion to amend and then another motion to amend, under those rules, you should take care of those motions and cure those before you move on to the third motion to amend and take that up separately.
With that, we will go ahead and vote then on the Second Amendment. James Simons.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is exactly why ordinances need to come to committee. And I think this is exactly why, at least in your, to lend some evidence to the need for Article 6 is half-formed ordinances from being hastily put on agendas and not formally thought through or developed. We could spend all night amending amendments, like we need to spend some more due diligence and time developing this ordinance, I would, and I'm not gonna make another motion to amend, but I would like to see, maybe this be tabled for tonight and reworked and refashioned and brought back before the committee, since there are at least 3 amendments that need to be made. Maybe we need to spend some more time fashioning this ordinance before we move forward on voting anything tonight.
So from my understanding, procedurally, we've had 2 amendments by the author of the ordinance, or the sponsor rather, and a 3rd amendment by JP Hires. From what parliamentarians say, it sounds like we need to vote on the original 2 amendments before moving on and voting on the 3rd amendment or entertaining another motion. So, Ms. Patty, will you please call the question, and that will be to the 2 amendments made by JP Wilson.
Order. We have a member of the quorum court who has had their hand raised. She's not in the committee, but I think that Eva Madison would like to speak to the things that we've had thus far.
Ms. Patty, please call the roll.
Just for clarification, JP Duncan, this is on JP Wilson's original ordinance to amend, correct?
It's on the 2 amendments made by JP Wilson.
You need to take up the 2nd amendment first, and dispose of it before taking up the 1st amendment.
Second one was adding the article to repeal ordinances in conflict with this ordinance. So I think that's what you're saying, Attorney Lester. So we're voting on the addition of an article to repeal.
I would suggest that it be a section that says that any portion of any ordinance that is in conflict hereto shall be repealed.
That's the part we'd be voting on first, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Don Simons,
Yes.
Robert Dennis,
Yes.
Suki Hires,
No.
Evelyn Rio Stafford,
Yes.
Jim Wilson,
Yes.
Butch Pond.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Patty. And now to vote on the 1st amendment,
Which is the exception for cups.
and that is to be added to Article 1, my understanding that conditional use permits would be the exception. Is the court clear on what we're voting on?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's great. That's why I asked the question. JP Wilson, will you please restate the 1st amendment?
Well, if I could ask Attorney Lester to restate Article 1 with the exception.
So Article 1 would state, all general ordinances shall be presented to the county attorney by the member of the quorum court introducing that ordinance in rough draft form at least 5 business days prior to the date of the committee meeting at which the member of the quorum court wishes to introduce the ordinance, except that an ordinance to ratify a conditional use permit granted or denied by the Planning and Zoning Board shall not be referred to a committee, but shall be referred directly to the quorum court for consideration.
Ms. Patty, please call the roll.
Don Simons,
Yes.
Robert Dennis,
Yes.
Suki Hires,
No.
Evelyn Rio Stafford,
I have a point of order, which is a clarification. Are we voting on just adding the amendment to this, or are we voting to approve this ordinance at this moment?
It's the amendment to the motion.
If it's just an amendment to the motion, aye.
Jim Wilson,
Yes.
Butch Pond,
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Petty. All right, thanks everybody for hanging in there with me. A lot of amendments here. My understanding is procedurally correct would be next to vote on the original motion with the 2 amendments.
Well, you had a third motion to amend that I think would now be could now be in order, because now the ordinance before you has the 2 amendments already in it.
Okay, then that was made by JP Hires, correct?
JP
No,
Rio.
I'm sorry. Would you please restate that motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to strike Article 6.
Second.
Thank you. And then JP Madison, I see your hand raised. I apologize for the delay.
I would like to speak on the main motion, so I'll wait.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion prior to calling the question? Seeing none, Ms. Patty, please take roll.
John Simons,
Abstain.
Suki Hires, or
Yes.
Robert Dennis,
No.
Suki Hires,
Yes.
Evelyn Rio Stafford,
Yes.
Jim Wilson,
No.
Butch Pond,
No.
I have 2 yes, 3 no's, and 1 abstain.
So the motion fails, correct?
Correct.
So we are back to the motion with the 2 amendments made by JP Wilson. Do I have any discussion from members of the committee? Seeing none, I'll go outside the committee. JP Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask the county attorney, when was the last time that amendment or new ordinances were submitted to MuniCode?
It's been about 4 years. We've sent them all to the AAC, who's now going to be doing our codification.
Okay. So in the 4 years since we've not codified any ordinances, how do members of the public obtain copies of ordinances?
The county clerk's office, we keep all ordinances filed in the county clerk's office.
So you have to come physically to the courthouse to get a copy. You can't get it online.
At the moment, no. We are working to get all of our ordinances online so that you can search them online, but we don't currently have them up and running yet.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to call JP Wilson's ordinance what it is. It's an attempt to silence the minority party. It's very disturbing that under existing ordinance, which is not in any way the 1979 resolution, I brought an ordinance forth to the court, and it basically, y'all didn't like it. So you're trying to prevent the minority party from ever having any voice. You're going to take everything to a committee where you have the majority strategically designed to silence us. We were all elected just as you were. And it is not fair. And I think you should think about the day that the tables are turned, if that's the way you would want to be treated. So not only are we being told you have to take everything to us, we're being told we can't bring anything back. That means that another JP couldn't even bring back the same ordinance. That subjects someone in a subsequent term of the quorum court. And whoever's drinking ice needs to put themselves on mute. It's really, really distracting. But this is why the quorum court is being repeatedly emailed and told we're being obstructionist, because that's exactly what this is. And it's very disturbing. And I do not believe this ordinance is constitutional. And I think that all this is going to do is buy this county an expensive lawsuit. Thanks.
Any other discussion, members of the committee? I don't see any hands raised on Zoom, so we will ask Ms. Patty to please
Gotta go to
call for a
public
vote.
comment. You need public comment?
I'm sorry. We'll open up for public comment.
You have Sarah Moore.
Ms. Moore.
Hello, good evening. Sarah Moore from Fayetteville. I think there was a lot of discussion and questions raised, and I know that JP Simons made a comment about, because there is so much conversation, that this is the first time that we brought this forward with, you know, a lot of the questions and concerns that have been raised, that he thought maybe it might be a good idea to table this. And so I really think that that's a good suggestion. I think that there's concern in the community about what this is potentially going to do and about some of the wording. And so I think allowing there to be more community conversation and the opportunity for this to come forward in another meeting would allow us some more time to vet that. Also, what JP Madison brought up in regard to, you know, the fact that we can't as a public see what's actually in place today is obviously a concern, especially given the pandemic, and many of us are not actually entering buildings and relying on, you know, online formats to be able to look at these pieces of information. Additionally, I just want to bring up that I understand that the back and forth is really hard for the chair and the committee members with this format of being in two different places. But I would really ask that there be a very set way that you decide when you're going to allow JPs to speak. I've been attending meetings very routinely for the last 2 years, and we've always allowed all JPs to speak at any time during the committee meetings if they're in attendance. There was some inconsistency tonight with when folks were allowed to speak, which could have some impact on the conversation. And I will tell you that I'm always happy when we're changing an ordinance, some kind of law, to get attorneys to weigh in. I think that's incredibly important for them to weigh in and be able to have some time in that discussion. So additionally, there is some noise that's happening with some of the folks. There is someone that repeatedly at meetings is crunching on ice. And so if we all, when we're not speaking, could mute, that would be very helpful, because us with the Zoom screens at home, it really is amplified and it's very hard to hear the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Any other public comment?
Phyllis Tavilla.
Hi, thank you for that. I have just a few things. I'm not understanding if this is only for items that come before this committee, or is this ordinance to affect all committees at all times? Is there a provision at all in place if this goes through, whereby if a committee is unwilling to discuss an ordinance that a JP brings forth, that there's a provision for that JP to be able to present it in another format as coming to the full quorum court, as happened last month? Because if you have a small group that's controlling these committees, or a committee rather, a JP who is asking for something that they might not agree with, they can just simply hold it up. And as we've seen in our federal government, that does not work very well. So it would probably be a good idea if we don't do this here. And then if this, I understand that County Attorney is going to look into whether this is unconstitutional. So if this ordinance is passed tonight, what are the provisions made to remove this? Will you have to have another planning services committee meeting to repeal this ordinance? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment?
Beth Koger.
Ms. Koger.
Thank you, Chairman Duncan. First of all, I'm sure you've already received the letter that I wrote today, but I just want to mention a couple of other things. I don't understand the need for this ordinance, as other people have already said. I mean, why it's coming up now. And that's one of the questions I asked that no one has really answered. And also, I think the fact that this ordinance is in the County Services Committee shows the need that we need an ordinance review committee. And as I read the ordinance, County Attorney Lester can correct me, the Judge Wood could form that, could appoint people to form an ordinance review committee. And next up, I don't understand. I don't have, okay. What, it just looks suspicious to me that this ordinance is coming up now after we just had a habitability ordinance. that was voted down, and also the CARES Act ordinance that JP Madison is bringing forward. If I understand this correctly, unless I'm missing something, if that is voted down, then it couldn't come for another year. And then by then, I mean, it wouldn't be, well, it would be moot. The whole issue would have been over by then. I had one other comment. Let me see my notes here. Oh, yeah, back to what, if I understood Attorney Lester correctly, I couldn't hear all of what he said, but I think he said he wasn't sure that this was constitutional, that he needed to do a little more research. If that is correct, then I think that right there is a reason that this should be tabled from tonight. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Cougar. Do we have any other public comment? Ms. Brown?
Good evening, Quorum Court. JPs, I want to second an ordinance review committee from Ms. Coger's comments. For this ordinance, I really can't think of a better way to neutralize certain perspectives than what is prescribed in this ordinance. So an imperfect ordinance comes forth and it's voted down and put on a shelf for a year. I mean, if your votes are in accordance with what is right and what is proper and what represents your constituents actually support, then you don't need cover like this. I don't think it's an accident that this ordinance comes after the habitability and CARES Act issues. A lot of people supported these ordinances that dealt with habitability and hunger relief in order to prioritize child welfare. And this ordinance allows you to be insulated from the discomfort of voting these down. And now you're making your discomfort a problem for people that don't see governance like you and that are in the minority. This removes potential cooperation between JPs that perhaps see differently after their votes are cast. A year feels very arbitrary, but it does make sense if you think about the time limit that there is on the CARES Act spending requirement. Highlighting engagement as a positive feature for this ordinance is dismissed. It does the opposite, in fact. See you guys at the food drive. I respect the acknowledgement of a need. Good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Any other public comment? We go see Ms. Sherry Main.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just had a couple of comments. Most people have already said what I'll just echo kind of briefly. I got one comment on the conflict maybe with the owner ordinance, section 11204 on the notification. There's a 14-day prior to the scheduled meeting of the planning board notification on any cups that are heard through the planning board. And on that same letter, there is a date for the next quorum court meeting that will hear the ratification on the cup. And it's always following the board meeting. It's the next meeting. So the planning board meetings are on Thursday. So I don't think we would have a conflict with the quorum court because there's a 30-day appeal process too. By bypassing committee, because that hasn't been a problem before. I don't foresee that to be a problem. I mean, there may be an instance and I may be missing something, but another point I wanted to bring up was on, if you can't bring up the ordinance again for 12 months after it was denied, what is the, is there any language in the ordinance to say you cannot bring up an ordinance again, rewritten differently? Maybe changing some of the verbiage in the ordinance where it would not mean the same thing, but basically, I mean, how is that going to be handled? Who's going to make that call? And is it going to be retroactive? Is it going to start from when the ordinance is signed? If it's retroactive, it goes back to January. If it's not, then anything previous to when it's signed as an ordinance could come back in if it's not retroactive. that was the 2 points I wanted to bring up. I just believe in if it's not broke, don't fix it. This has been working, and I don't know why all of a sudden a change needs to happen now. I'm not understanding the change. There's going to be a lot of controversy over the change and more reading into it. And I think Attorney Lester needs to examine some of the points that's been brought up. And I think it needs to be tabled and a little more discussion and thought considered on it, and Attorney Lester looking at the legality of it a little deeper. And that's my thoughts. And Willie, quit crunching ice. Thanks.
I'm not.
Thank you, Ms. Bain. Any other public comment? Seeing none, Ms. Patty?
I move to
Please.
table this ordinance until the April committee meeting so we can get some of these questions answered.
Second. Attorney Lester, help me here on Robert's rules. This new motion to table.
In order to make a motion to table, you have to have the floor, and so you would have to call on JP Rio Stafford.
Sorry.
So that's the chair. It's on the chair.
With that, I would like to go ahead and see us vote on this ordinance since we've heard through the two amendments. So we'll be voting on the item 4.1 with the two amendments. The first to Article 1 that excludes CUPs, and the second on Article 7, the motion to repeal. Ms. Patty, please take the roll.
John Simons,
Abstain.
Robert Dennis,
Yes.
Suki Hires,
No.
Evelyn Rio Stafford,
No.
Jim Wilson,
Yes.
Butch Pond.
Abstain.
I have 2 yes, 2 no, and 2 abstain.
I would go to the chair.
The abstentions count as no votes, so that motion
No,
fails.
abstains don't count as no votes. The tie would go to the chair.
Yes, then my vote. The motion passes to full form court. And we had an amendment to the agenda to add time for discussion on planning fees. And at this time, I will turn it over to JP Dennis to lead that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll lay this off onto one of my constituents that asked the question, and I didn't have the answer. And it's something just to consider, study out, and of course, I should just go and do the study and then come back and tell you what I learned. All the building developments that are going on, they were curious about all the work that's being done to help the developers develop those developments. And what the question was, do the builders pay for enough fees to cover the cost of all the employees that have to work at the planning and planning board? And I couldn't answer that. I don't know if it's if they take in enough money that they're not, that they're paying their own way, or do we have to subsidize them with taxpayers' money to develop all these plans for builders? And the person who was asking said, well, I'm tired of paying for everything for everybody else. And so I don't know the answer to that question. I was curious if anybody knew it here. And so I just wanted to bring it up and ask. And I thought someone would say, well, here's the answer, Robert. But if not, I'll just go to the planning commission and ask them. But people are tired of paying for things that they don't feel like that they're part of. Thank you.
Thanks, JP Dennis. Any other comments around planning board fees?
JP Lemming has his hand raised.
JP Lemming.
Robert, can you explain that a little bit deeper about not wanting to pay? What do you really mean?
Well, what I mean is the taxpayer pays the cost of running the planning board, and am I saying it correctly on the commission? So they're paying the taxpayer's paying all the cost, and the builders are getting the things taken care of, you know, and so they come to the planning commission to get things done.
So you're saying the planning commission's doing what? Just making sure the CUPs is done right? Because the planning board, the planning commission ain't going out there doing work. That's where I'm kind of lost.
Well, I thought they were doing work down there with all the
When you say down there, what do you mean down there? Down there in the courthouse, down there in the planning commission, or down Perry Grove on the dirt?
At the commission, down at their offices.
Okay, when you say doing work, what kind of work are them people saying they're doing for them?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I assume that they were looking at plans and deciding, going out to sites and looking. I think they were doing something. I don't know. We have the CUPs that come before us, and someone has to do the work.
Well, the county is obligated to keep the CUPs on right track to keep up with that, but I don't see us. I don't know. That's what I was trying to study your comment to what degree you're saying that they're doing, and I'd like to know the same answer, but I'd like to follow up on that.
Well, I would too. I just wanted to bring it. The person asked me if I'd bring it up. I brought it up, and now we can kind of look into it and see if we learn anything.
Robert, can you kind of write down?
Make a motion, Billy. I just wanted to have some discussion about it.
Well, I know, I understand what you're saying, but I'd like to kind of have a little more questionnaire, kind of fill out the real questions that you're really asking, and we can follow up with it and try to make sure that we're not overdoing what we need to be doing. We need a certain degree of work we got to get done, but we don't need to go too far. Thank you.
That's all I had.
Any other discussion from the court?
Chair?
JP Lemming.
Are you down to the end of public comment, or is that where you're going next?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, I'll wait my turn. I didn't want you to come to an adjourn. I need to talk before we adjourn.
So moving on, as JP Lemming alluded to public comment time. Open this up to the public.
Carrie Main has her hand raised.
Ms. Main.
Thank you, JP Duncan, Chair. And what I want to comment to Robert Dennis's question, maybe I can allude a little bit to answer it. I don't know. Nathan Crouch wanted to do that, but all of the employees in the planning office are employees of the county. So when they go out and they do a site development for a cup, any pictures they take, all the time they spend there, they're on the payroll of Washington County as a planning department employee. So the taxpayers are paying their salaries. As far as the engineers, when it gets into more of a technical thing and an engineer needs to review certain things, I believe the county has an engineer on payroll as well. And in some instances, the developers reimburse the engineer fees. I think that may be the judge's call. But as far as the fees and for the cups and in the planning department, everything is minimal. The fees are not very much for a cup. Of course, they have to pay however many residents around within a 300-foot radius of where the cup's going to be, mail outs to all of those. So the cost is very minimal as far as to the developers and the builders. And I think from my last conversation with Nathan Crouch. He told me that revamping the planning codes, kind of rewriting them and making them easier to understand and flow. So there may be some upcoming change in the procedure as far as the fees collected. That may be some of the changes they're going to make. I don't know. I haven't seen the draft of what changes are going to be made, but I just thought I'd throw that out. Maybe that helps answer somewhat of it. If not, then I guess you would need to call Nathan Crouch up at the planning. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Main. Any other public comment?
Speaker has her hand raised.
Speaker.
Hi, I just wanted to thank the Quorum Court and Washington County in general for doing the food drive March 1st through the 29th. For anybody who doesn't know about it, they can drop stuff off at the courthouse. I know our county is in need and COVID has affected a lot of people. I just wanted to thank them for putting that on.
Thank you, Speaker.
Beth Koger has her hand raised.
Ms. Koger.
Thank you, JP. Chairman Duncan, I appreciate that. My comment has to deal with the cost of having meetings like this meeting tonight when there's not an emergency, when there was really no emergency for this ordinance to be brought forward. And if I understand correctly, every JP gets $200 for a meeting, so that's like $3,000. I mean, for my taxpayer dollars, I think that we could better organize our meetings and maybe combine and not have meetings when there's really nothing for a meeting like this when there's nothing that is an emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Koger. Any other public comment?
There are no other hands raised except for JP Lemming.
JP Lemming, you're a member of the court, but we'll hear this public comment.
Thank you, Sam. What I'd like to hear from the service committee is I'd like for us to follow up on where we are on Johnson Controls. We haven't had no feedback on what they've got done and what they've been saving, and you know this all happened a long time ago. But I'd like for us to get an update on all of what's going on with Johnson Control, and I'd also like for the service committee to get a kind of why we ain't moving on our Motorola or our AWIN infrastructure, why we've got the money collected now, and I just don't understand what we're really waiting on to get to rolling on the new radio system, because there's a lot of fire departments out there right now that's needing radios. We can't buy any more radios, and we're having to share radios, you know, and everybody's talking about this COVID and scared of COVID, and we're having to hand radios back and forth and try to keep them clean and keep everybody safe. And we need to kind of move on that. And I know the Winslow Dirt Pit's been a sore subject for a long time, but I would really like some follow-up on where we are on that and why it's just gotten really quiet. We just need some answers for all of them questions. I thank you for my time.
Thank you, JP Lemming. Do we have any further public comment? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion